Good morning and welcome to Funky Rainbow's Book Bazaar Season 4. I can't tell you how happy I am to even say those words, Season 4, on behalf of all of us at Team Funky Rainbow. I mean, the power of the bazaar, the power of books, to come for a small independent bookstore like us to be able to pull off this show now for almost 2 years. It's obviously because of the unstinting support of all of you out there who are watching us, who cheer us on, and who support us by loving all the books that we share with you as much as we love them, if not more. It really gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to Book Bazaar Season 4, and this is our first episode. And as has been the case with Team Funky Rainbow, there's always a glitch even after everything gets set up. I'm afraid that's why we started 15 minutes late, 15 minutes into the show today. Our internet connection just absolutely packed up. I don't know. Just hang on one second, just 1 second. Some technical setting that needs to be set up. Yeah, I'm on 2 AKG and Realtek speakers. Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that, but yes, of course, the tech glitches that never seem to leave us. This time it was just the internet connection, and both of them, not one but just both of them, that went down. But here we are with the first episode of season 4 of our Book Bazaar, and we are utterly delighted that so many of you are there watching us, because this is a really special episode for all of us. It is, of course, the theme of the bazaar is storytelling, and I know, what are we except the stories that we create for ourselves, the stories that we read. And I'm delighted to see our dear friend Munmun Mitra Das from Kolkata joining us all the way from Kolkata with her children, I hope. Moon, we are so delighted to see you after a long time. And there are our lovely young friends Avyukt and Ameya watching us with hopefully Divya Menon and Siddharth Nair. Warm welcome to you as well. And so many of you logging in and saying hello to us. Preeti Ramchandran, good morning. You say it's so exciting to be back at our Saturday Bazaar. Hope all of you at FR had a great start to the new year. Absolutely. You have, always, it's our readers, our supporters, our fans who make every single year, every single season of the bazaar special for us. Divya Purandar, what a pleasure to see you. The theme of this bazaar, and it's a special one, like I said, is storytelling. And so what we're focusing on, are books about stories, about the power of stories, about the interconnectedness of stories all over the world, about the ability of stories to really, to sort of influence our, curiosity, to influence our emotions, to absolutely, let our imagination take flight. And we know we're doing, we know that all of you watching us, whether you're watching us on Instagram or you're watching us on YouTube, you're watching us on Facebook, all of you are readers, all of you love stories, and all of you know the power of stories to just transform our lives. That's what we want to celebrate at this bazaar. And what prompted this theme, after we had planned all the themes out for the bazaars in this season, was the news of a wonderful new book by that doyen of a storyteller, Gita Ramanujam, who's going to join us later in the show today. Her new book from Penguin India, Tales from the World. Okay, I'm not going to show it up to any of you. It's going to get launched at the Funky Rainbow Bazaar. But, Tales from the World, Gita Ramanujam's new book published by, Penguin India, that's getting launched virtually at our book bazaar today. Like these serendipitous things in life, I mean, you make your plans, but life absolutely happens while you're making these plans. So while we had planned a whole bunch of things for the bazaar, there was lockdown in Bangalore on the weekends. There was, we couldn't, get out and come. We were supposed to start on the 22nd, but Bangalore was locked down that weekend. And then, of course, miraculously, they lifted the lockdown, and, Gita's wonderful book, came to us. And I'm so, so delighted that someone that all of us know for so many decades now absolutely is going to be our guest at the bazaar. Divya Purandar, you're saying it's great to be back. Moon saying, yes, Amritayu and Yashaswini are here. We're just absolutely delighted to see children at the bazaar always. And Guhan says, wow, my favorite storyteller, Geeta Auntie, at my favorite bookstore, Funky Rainbow. There is a surprise in store for you, lovely dear Guhan. I'm not going to say what it is just now, but there's something that we're doing at this bazaar, and you will know that at 12 o'clock when we launch the book, that we haven't done in any other bazaar before. So wait and watch, guys. There is some total excitement lined up for all of you. Again, my apologies for starting a little late. The quintessential tech glitch just absolutely had us down for 15 minutes. But let me start off with a clutch of recommendations. But before I do, I just want to say that Funky Rainbow has been running a campaign, to support libraries across the country. This is a campaign that we started out on the 1st of December, and we're running it till the 28th of February. I know many of you who are watching have supported us on the campaign. The Love a Library campaign has identified 4 libraries from across the country, one from the south of India, one from the north, one from the east, and one from the west of India. The libraries who reached out to us in the pandemic years saying that they wanted our lovely books to come to them as well. I'm going to let Sham play a video about our Love a Library campaign. So that was a video on our Love a Library campaign. We've identified 4 libraries. Let's Open a Book from Spiti in Himachal Pradesh, Reading Space from Cuddalore in Tamil Nadu, the Tarakki Foundation from Tonk, Rajasthan, and the libraries at the children's homes in Ribhoi, Meghalaya, libraries who want our curated collection of books there. So we've, asked you to join hands with us to come forward and support the campaign, whatever we raise in the course of this campaign. And I'm delighted to say that we have raised almost, I think, 1.5 lakhs at the moment, completely from the support of every single one of you who have enjoyed books for your children, from Funky Rainbow. The money will just be equally divided, and the librarians will choose books that will suit their libraries in these spaces. We have one of the librarians who from Spiti who visited us and actually chose her books for us to send it to her once the campaign is done. We have a short video offers. Okay, Sham says that the video is not up and not playing with our limited broadband connection. We will play it up next week, but all the videos are up on our social media coordinates on Instagram and on Facebook. For my friends on Instagram who couldn't see that video, it's up on our Instagram page itself, the Love a Library campaign. Please do click on the link and consider supporting us. Every little drop counts for us to be able to reach books here, there, everywhere. And thank you. There are many of you out there who are watching who have already supported, and I do know that that support really energizes us, and we hope these books will be in the month of March at libraries in 4 remote corners of the country. With that, I would like to start off on my recommendations. I can see so many more friends. I can see Archana Natraj saying, lovely to have our Saturday special back. And Arunji, who says good morning and that he has attended sessions of Geeta Ramanujam. Who hasn't really? But this is the launch of Geeta's brand new book, Tales from the World. And I assure you, storytelling fun is just guaranteed. My first recommendation this morning is a lovely book from Tulika. It's a book that that we revisit every single time, actually, about the fact that stories are just completely timeless. Stories are just interconnected, and stories will come and go. A book that really sends out that message so beautifully is this wonderful one by Sandhya Rao and illustrated by Srividya Natarajan, Stories on the Sand. It's such a lovely book, I tell you. It's meant for 5+-year-olds. There are 4 young children in the book. I mean, there are many children, of course, in the book, but it begins with Irfan, who has a story in his head. And, there's Suzanne, and there's Wang, and there's Tan. Every one of those children has a story on their lips, has a story in their heads. And you can see, Srividya's wonderful watercolor washes absolutely, bringing alive the ephemeral nature of stories. Now, what do? They write these stories down on the sand, maybe on white sand, maybe on yellow sand, maybe on pebbly sand, maybe on clayey sand. And then what happens to the stories? The stories, of course, the waves come and the waves go. The ebb and flow, of the waves takes away the stories, only for them to be rewritten again. I mean, so much like the ebb and flow of stories across the world. And really a book that brings alive the timelessness of stories, the interconnectedness of stories. It doesn't matter whether you're Irfan, whether you're Wang, whether you're Tan, whether you're Suzanne, whether you're Vidya, whether you're Geeta, whether you're Sham, the stories that you write, are so wonderfully connected. Here, there, everywhere. It's a beautiful book. We recommend it for 5+-year-olds. And really, Srividya's glorious illustrations, her wonderful watercolor washes. I mean, just absolutely capture the timelessness of stories everywhere. That is, my first recommendation for you. The second one that I have is this wonderful book from the stable of Karadi Tales. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this one, called The Story and the Song, written by Mansi Subramaniam and illustrated by Aishwarya Shankar Narayanan. It is such a beautiful story about why stories must absolutely be told and what happens to those that don't get told. So the story begins with young Parvati. It's set in a village. You can see a lovely little serene village in India. And young Parvati, who's the daughter of the flower seller, is all excited. So is so are all the villagers in this little village in Tamil Nadu. Why? That's because Parvati is getting married, and there's all kinds of goings on. Things are getting decorated. There's color here, there, everywhere, and she's getting married. To a tradesman called Kamban. Now, what happens in all this? There is the Tai, who's the wisest woman in the village, who makes a visit and tells Parvati something just before she is to get married. And you know what happens? Actually, Parvati has a story inside her which she wants to tell, and actually a song that she wants to sing. But there's just too much going on. I mean, we can imagine, right? It's a wedding after all. So what does she do? She just keeps them to herself. But stories and songs and poems and verses, they have minds of their own. They are determined to escape. They are determined to be told. This is such a charming folk tale, a Tamil folk tale that has been adapted by Mansi Subramaniam. What happens to that story? What happens to that song? What happens? Do they escape from Parvati immediately? Does it take a while for the stories to come out? Oh my God. I mean, what a wonderful story about why, we must never, never keep stories within us. They're always, always meant to be told, meant to be shared, meant to be enjoyed together. It's a lovely book. We'd recommend it. I mean, I always maintain that these age recommendations are just incidental. When a story works for you, whether it works for your children, we'd say 6+ year olds, the story and the song, a wonderful folk tale from Tamil Nadu, adapted, by Karadi Tales. And that was my second recommendation. The third one, and I know we focus almost entirely on Indian books, but there's this one which I absolutely had to pick up and I had to share with you because it's a personal favorite. It's a story that touched me so deeply, so just right where it matters. This one, and I hope a couple of you have actually read it and you've already know of this one. But if you don't, what a spectacular, glorious one this is, called Kafka and the Doll. The picture book, adapted by Larissa Thule. I mean, written as by Larissa Thule and illustrated by Rebecca Green. It's a true story. I mean, it's a true story of the writer Franz Kafka. And for all of you who've read Kafka, who've heard of Kafka, very, very dark, somber writing. I mean, he wrote at a time when not much was right with the world, and that perhaps really influenced his worldview. And on one day when he was walking in the park, he encounters a young girl who who is also there in the park, and she has lost her doll and she is completely inconsolable. She is, I can see Arunji saying, wonderful book with illustrations. It's really a touching story. It's absolutely the right word that you have used, Arun. The thing is, the child is just inconsolable because she can't find her doll. So what happens? So Kafka, and one would think that a writer of such a serious, somber nature, what would he be able to do? Well, what he decides to do in the real world is to start delivering letters to the girl as if the letters are being written by her doll. And those letters tell stories of the adventures that the doll is having traveled here, there, everywhere. And that girl, she is just absolutely, what can I say, like, rejuvenated. She is, she stops despairing about the doll going missing. And the stories that the doll tells her, which actually in reality is Kafka's letters written as the doll to the young girl, they just energize her. And how? I mean, if there's a book that affirms the life changing power of stories, it's got to be this wonderful book, Kafka and the Doll. And, like I said, while we focus almost entirely on Indian children's books, I mean, this one just had to come into this bazaar on the power of storytelling. What happens? What happens? Does the girl find out that it's Kafka? Remember, it's based on a true life incident. Does the girl find out that, it is Kafka writing the letter? When does she find out, if at all, that she does? My, what a beautiful book. Please do, consider picking it up and reading it. The story transforms your life much in the manner that stories normally, much in the manner that the story of this book transforms the young girl's life. Our next recommendation, and I, just quickly keeping a watch on the time so that, we don't run out of it. I know we started a little late, but my next recommendation is a lovely book that I read, I think, 10 years ago, when it came out, because it was by a writer whom I absolutely admire in the Indian, children's publishing space. That's Anushka Ravishankar. And it was such a pleasure to see the 10th anniversary edition of this book come out just a couple of weeks ago. I know a couple of you probably already guessed what that one is. This excellent book called The Storyteller by Anushka Ravishankar, which is Tales from the Arabian Nights. I mean, the book came out 10 years ago. I'm so delighted that Puffin has a fantastic 10th anniversary edition. And you can see this wonderfully illustrated edition, illustrated by Sheena Devaya, so beautifully produced, so well written, so wonderfully produced. You know what the stories, you all of you know the story of the Arabian Nights, basically, right? And the thing is, it's Queen Scheherazade, the stories that Queen Scheherazade, I mean, what would happen if your life depended on your ability to be able to tell a good story? I mean, what a fantastic premise for a book, really. Like, even when the Arabian Nights were written, right? I mean, night after night after night, Queen Scheherazade, she has to tell stories, and she conjures these marvelous, wonderful stories, basically, right? And these one night turns into 1001 nights. And I think that 1001 was primarily because that's how much the writer could write. Because if you let it be with Queen Scheherazade, I think she would have been able to go on for 2001 nights. I mean, Anushka Ravishankar telling these tales so engagingly. And really, you have to read it to know, the power of stories, because in this case, her life depends on the telling of a good story. I mean, there are tons of books that we've put into our bazaar about stories. We've got a whole lot of folktale adaptations which are up in our bazaar as well. But we've picked and chosen 4 or 5 books that simply just reinforce the power of storytelling in every way, whether it is to pick your curiosity, whether it is to let your imagination take flight, whether it is to effect a transformation just entirely, whether it is to see you through difficult times in your lives. We have tried to pick a few books like that, that literally focus on the power of stories and storytelling. While there are, I think, more than 60 books up in the bazaar, collections of folk tales, and a lot of these have been put in by talking to storytellers and understanding what works for them in terms of narrating stories. What do they like to tell? We've picked and chosen, many of their choices, at least many that are available at Funky Rainbow. But what we're focusing on are primarily books that are all about the power, the transformative power of storytelling. This one, we'd say would absolutely work for 8, 9+ year olds. Our next recommendation, this morning is, a set of books. I mean, we do know in India, my God, how many of us grew up listening to the Vikram and Vetal stories. There too, your life depended on a good story. King Vikram, I mean, he is prodded and prompted by the Vetal to actually, where he listens to the story, but he cannot open his mouth and respond to anything that Vetal tells him after. How difficult is that? How many of us listen to stories? Don't we have all our whys and what happened and why did this, why did he go there? Why did someone else come here? But imagine keeping your mouth zip, because if that happened, if you opened your mouth, the Vetal would just fly back to the tree, and the whole journey for King Vikram would begin all over again. What I would like to recommend, and here too, it's the power of telling stories and retelling stories. These are stories that have remained and been with us for so long now, right? The Vetal Panchavimshati. We know that our classics are all, we know that classic literature has such wonderful tales, really, but we are focusing on 2 adaptations of the Vikram and Vetal stories, done by the wonderful children's writer, feminist writer, playwright and theatre person, Poily Sen Gupta. And you know what? Poily, being the wonderful writer that she is, she has a spunky heroine, a 12-year-old girl in her Vikram and Vetal story called Upa, I think her name was. And what happens is, there is a clever twist. How does Upa come into these tales? It is the tale of King Vikram and, and Vetal. But what is Upa's role in it? And be sure she has a fantastic feminist slant just right there, making us say, atta girl, that's the way we really need to adapt our stories for the contemporary generations. It is, of course, funny, and it is, you laugh, you'll giggle, you'll mull over questions when, with Poily's writing, she'll make you think about these things. But, it is eventually the power of telling stories. She's celebrating the power of stories to keep things alive for us. These are 2 wonderful books, each priced at 199 rupees, and Poily's wonderful retelling of the Vikram and Vetal tales. We would say certainly 10+ for these stories, and adults of all ages, really. Vikram and Vetal and Vikramaditya's throne. Our next recommendation, and I'm just quickly keeping watch on time so we don't run out of time, basically, is this wonderful collection that came out. And I can see Ruby Sudhir Basant saying that this is a wonderful session. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. I'm so glad that you're watching. Before I actually get on to my next recommendation, shall I just quickly say hello to a bunch of people, who have watched us, who have joined us this morning? Do you have a list of the people that I can say hello to? Yes. So there's Rifa Diaries, Pari the Bookworm, Savi Karnel, Orb Craft, Bhanupriya Jagdishan, Padma, Shruti Sri Raghunath, Ankita Ravi Mishra, The Artisan, Rishan, Praveen, Andalib Wajid, Tantravati, Zugri Art, Eureka Children's Books, Ashima Grover, Book B Shreyu, Varsha Hariharan, Satya Shrujana Reddy, Kaju Joy, Munmun Mitra Das, Divya Menon, Avyukta Meya Nair, Preeti Ramchandran, Gohan, Divya Purandar, Ruby Sudhir Basant. Thank you so much for joining us at the premiere of Book Buzzaar Season 4. It's such a pleasure that so many of you are here on Instagram and on Facebook, and perhaps a couple of you watching on YouTube as well. I will quickly continue with one or two more recommendations because I know you're all eagerly waiting for the most important event of the day, and I have already told you what that is. But what the real surprise is, you're going to just have to wait for another 10 minutes before we get there. My next recommendation is this wonderful book that came to us a couple of years ago, and we were all just absolutely stunned by the beauty of such a book, the diversity of storytelling traditions in India. There is this excellent one called Lore of the Land by Nalini Ramchandran that focuses on different storytelling traditions in India. I mean, it's high, isn't it time that we had a book like this, really, right? One that absolutely throws light on the fantastic storytelling traditions that exist in our country. And it's a clutch of stories, really, a set of, I mean, we are, after all, the land of stories, a land of stories that are told every single day, every single moment, really, right? And a book that celebrates each one of these traditions. Are they repetition stories? Are there stories that are, that stories that can be sung? Are there stories that that have puzzles and riddles sort of tucked away into them? This is a flamboyant book, if ever there was one. I just love the way Abhishek Chaudhary has illustrated each one of those stories. And I'm not going to tell you anything more about the stories, but be assured that the profound powers the profound powers of storytelling just unravel themselves in this beauty of a book, which I think both children and adults will utterly and absolutely enjoy. And while you're enjoying these stories, you're also absolutely going to be, introduced to the diversity of storytelling traditions in India. So that's an absolute must have in every home, school, library, for sure. My next recommendation, and this one, and I can see Arun saying this is an amazing book. Indeed, it is an amazing book. My next one, and I'm probably close with this one, for today, is this lovely book that was put together by different storytellers, across the years. We have storytellers in India, and this one, put together by Feast, which is the Federation of Asian Storytellers, called Royals, Wise and Otherwise, a collection of 27 royal stories, ready to tell royal stories. This wonderful collection of folk tales featuring kings, queens, emperors, maharajas, sultans, chieftains, princes, princesses, what is very lovely about this particular book that has been put together by Feast, and let me tell you the storytellers that it does feature. There's Nupur Agarwal, there's Aparna Atreya, there's Roger Jenkins, there's Margaret Reed McDonald, there's Jiva Raghunath, Kiran Shah, I'm sure Srividya Venkat. I mean, I'm absolutely sure that you have heard each one of them tell stories in different contexts across the last few years. Now, when storytellers have written each one of these stories, they have focused largely on stories as narrative stories. I mean, what is, they're written in a manner that becomes easy for you to narrate, which means each one of you can pick it up and can narrate these stories to children. I mean, the stories come from all over the world, whether it's Thailand, India, Indonesia, Japan, Finland. And there are, at the end of each story, fantastic tips for the telling of these stories, which makes it such a wonderful resource for parents, teachers, and librarians who want to engage their children with storytelling. And of course, what I particularly love, even more than the tips, the wisdom and folly of human beings every single time, captured so beautifully in this collection, Royals, Wise and Otherwise. This one published by Feast. And you can see, I think, children, and so beautifully illustrated by Uma Krishnaswamy, her gouache style of illustration, really adding life to these tales. It's surely one that you will utterly and absolutely enjoy. Rupa Baliga, so lovely to see you at the Buzzaar. I know you looked at the other book and said it looks absolutely gorgeous. It indeed is. We do have some more books, but you know what, we had this glitch that began, that we got our season 4 of the Buzzaar started on. I'm afraid we did have books by storytellers. There are several books, by storytellers that we wanted to focus on, and I'm just going to quickly show them to you, because it's lovely when storytellers really write books. There's just some charm to the reading of those stories, the musicality, the cadences of the words. Each one of these, all of these things come alive when storytellers really write books. We have a clutch of them. We have Janaki Sabesh's book. We have Jiva Raghunath's Stories I Like to Tell. We have the late and just wonderful Ankit Chadda's My Gandhi Story. I mean, these are all books that storytellers have written, and not to take away the two from our own team. There's Sham Madhavan Sharda, Grey Stroke with Kokachi and Makachi, and there is Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj with Chip Chirp Hoot. Do look at our collection, folks. I mean, there are a lot more books by these storytellers. There are folk tales aplenty. There are, like I said, books that celebrate the power of stories, books that show you the transformation that stories can bring about in our lives. There are books written by different storytellers, and there are folk tales aplenty, all of which have been recommended to us by different tellers. All up on our site, as always, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar, and you'll find so many headers for different themes of bazaars that we have done. Click on the one that says storytelling, and you are going to find over 50, 60 books up there. The last one that I want to recommend, and there's always a last, isn't it? Even after I say, okay, over and done with, there's always a last book. I'm not sure many of you have seen this one, but this one by Jane Sahi, published by Ekalavya, called In Our Own Words. It's a resource book. It's a resource book that teachers, parents, librarians, students, just anyone can use. And it's a resource book that primarily helps you, with tips on how to write, on how to do, different activities in the classroom, how to, use tips and tools to promote literacy in the classroom. But why have I picked it at this Buzzaar? She gives such wonderful bits of information on picking books up for read alouds. tips and things that you can do in order to, let's say, write a story yourself, or become a good reader, or the things that go into storytelling that make you a good storyteller. I think it's a fantastic resource. It's a fantastic educational resource of for everyone, for just about anyone at all. And I've taken it and chosen it, simply because I feel that that segment on shaping stories in your head, I mean, being able to tell them, narrate them to the audiences that are watching, adults or children, very, very relevant to a bazaar on storytelling. Jane Sahi, all of you know what fantastic work she's done in the field of education and literacy. This is a lovely book. And Bindya Parwani, thank you so much for supporting us in everything we do. You say, finally, a book for us. Not to worry, Bindya. We absolutely will tell you that every single book we've recommended today, absolutely for adults and children as well. So with that, our recommendations for books, coming to a halt. I know we have a small segment of new arrivals that we would like to show you before we get started with the book launch today. Yeah, and those were some of the new arrivals on our shelves. You can see lots and lots of new books that have come to us. Please do, check our site, www.funkyrainbow.com, for books for children of all ages, also books for adults. Like I said, you'll never come either to our physical store or to our website and go away without a book, that may not interest you. With that, we are getting set for our next segment, and I know many of you are eagerly waiting just for that segment. All of you know, I mean, just every single one of you who's been watching here today, knows full well that the guest of the day today is none other than the master storyteller, Geeta Ramanujam. Before we invite her up on screen, we're going to have to rejig our tables a little bit so we can accommodate another person. And I'm 100% sure you can already hear her laughing at the background. But even more than Geeta's laughter, what absolutely, let's just say that has taken over the whole world is the charm with which she tells her stories. Really, ladies and gentlemen, my guest this morning certainly needs no introduction at all. Geeta Ramanujam of Kathalaya. And I'm sorry, not just ladies and gentlemen. I know there are many young people watching us this morning as well. And what was that surprise? I know one of you said, Geeta Auntie is my favorite storyteller. And I think that's young Guhan from Madras who said that, really, right? The surprise for you, Guhan, for all our guests, for all the young people watching, is that in 2 years of the Bazaar, at the 4th season, the premiere episode of our 4th season, we have a guest who's come live to Funky Rainbow. And we absolutely couldn't have had a better person than Geeta. I'm surprised if you didn't hear her laughter from the other room already. Absolutely and utterly delighted to present Geeta Ramanujam to you. Just give us a second to rejig the chairs. Yes. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I want to see those comments. It's an absolute honor, such a privilege to be sitting next to someone that I know for over 25 years now. She's seen me in my school uniform, really, right? Seen me, I don't know, tell stories, sometimes tall tales as well, really. But Geeta Ramanujam here, and here today, one, you all know, because she's such a wonderful storyteller, but also because we're launching her latest book. And I'm not going to say anything more about the book till the launch actually happens. But really, and I can see so many comments going up saying, wow, oh my God, yeah. And I really hope the children are here. It's a big first for Funky Rainbow. We've been doing everything online. Our guests have always been online. Wow. Geeta, this is the best way to say that the world's going to be all right. No mask. And celebrating the power of storytelling. We're not being careless. We just know stories will take us through wherever we are. So we're going to have Shyam play a video before we get on with the rest of the program. Yes, absolutely. Shyam perhaps wanted us to smile on camera extra. And... wow. It was supposed to be a launch in the real world, but in the absence of it, we really do have Geeta with us. And as far as we are concerned, it's a launch in the real world.
It is.
We have just one little thing that needs to be done, and it's my absolute privilege and honor to invite someone who's put every single story that I tell. I mean, I know hundreds of you say, how can I talk 19 to a dozen every week? The one person who's responsible for that, my absolute pleasure to invite my mother to come up here to receive the first copy of Geeta's book. And I'm going to make an exit because when mum's the word, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my God.
And for her.
Yes. Okay.
So you can open it up. Open it up. Yeah. Show it up.
Okay. So this is for Geeta. And, not only a close friend, we share the same birthday. We have worked together, and she is a great soulmate, I would say. I think that's the best. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Geeta.
We want you to open it. Yes. And Geeta, you open it.
Okay. Great. Wow. I don't think even the offline would have been so good. Yeah.
Let me help you pick it up. Yeah. So we want you to show it up, both of you.
So we share the same name, Geeta and Geeta. Thank you, Funky Rainbow. Thank you, Vidya, Muttama, Shyam, the whole team. I hope I don't start crying because I'm feeling very overwhelmed after a long time because I want to answer all your questions today. Yes. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you so much.
Very emotional. And I've known Geeta for eons now as a teacher, as a librarian, as a storyteller, whatnot. Yes. Thank you so much, Geeta. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's going to be good reading your book.
Yes, thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was I have to, to tell you that that was a friend when I sent out this invitation to her. And I hope she's watching, Kiran Srinivas. I hope you're watching on YouTube. She said, it's the power of 2G. Geeta and Geeta, both, friends from school.
Yeah.
I mean, friends from when they started their
Fabulous.
teaching careers. And as teachers, and then Geeta moving on to becoming a librarian, and then moving on to becoming a storyteller. So it was the power of 2G that you saw right there. And I can see so many congratulatory messages going up. I know if we start calling them out, we're absolutely going to perhaps run out of time. But thank you, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Rohini Shivalingam, Revati
Yeah.
Karmakar,
Oh, Rohini.
several, Divya
Swati.
Purandar,
Oh, Bindya. Wow.
Swati Kakodkar,
Yes.
all
Wonderful. I
all
can-
Geeta Ramanujam
Yeah.
fans. What else?
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
We also want to send out a thank you to Penguin India for
Yes.
bringing out this wonderful book. Sohini Mitra, Mansi Shetty, and the team at Penguin India.
Yes.
This is what the world needs: books by storytellers to make us, to take us to places that we haven't been to otherwise, to make us believe that everything's going to be all right, and to let us know that there's nothing like a good story that can transform your life.
I can see my daughter's message.
Ah.
Saying, Geeta auntie, so nice to see you.
The two Geetas have another thing in common. Two Chatterbox daughters. Spatika Ramanujam, what a pleasure to have you here at the Buzzaar.
How difficult it was to continue.
And all the credit for getting Geeta money in here goes to Muttama Devaya, because my mom never listens to me. That I can definitely tell you. And as Sham has rightly said, the feeling is mutual. But we'll let Geeta say a few words about the book before we start off a quick conversation with you.
Okay.
But please do go ahead. There's just so many people in the audience,
Yes. And don't go away, because I think you will find the conversation interesting. And we don't switch off, okay? Because
Say it loud.
So this, I think I put it on Facebook. It was a dream to bring out a book, and initially I wanted to do it for adults, but I think what I must be grateful to Penguin, the authors, is they kind of brought about a marriage between the grown-ups and the young adults and the children. So I would say this is probably one of the first books which can reach which can be read by anyone, because the stories in this appeal to people from all ages. So you could have a frog story for little ones, or you could have this mountain felt so lonely. So so it has all the emotions and characteristics
Absolutely.
that I feel a story should have. And this is something which is very close to my heart. All my best collections are in this story.
Fabulous.
So,
How
thank you.
very lovely.
And definitely, it couldn't have been a better place to launch this than in this beautiful, absolutely warm, hospitable, generous, emotional place like Funky Rainbow. I mean, I never even thought this would happen, but I'm so glad that it's happening here. Thanks to the entire team. I will treasure this moment forever.
Yay! We do want to say Tales from the World. You have autographed copies available at Funky Rainbow. Geeta is here. We're going to get real autographs. They're not going to paste stickers on it that are autographs. So it makes a big difference to readers. I've been reading the book across the last 2 days, and I just have to say that there are stories in it for young and old. There are layers in every story that you may read as a child, you may read as a young adult, you may read as a parent, as a grandparent. You're utterly and absolutely going to enjoy this collection that takes you all over the world, but at its heart tells you that there's nothing like a good story in this world, whether you're in India or in France or in Tibet or in Thailand. So I have a bunch of questions for you, Geeta.
Yes.
And like I said, wow, this angle is like just lovely. Otherwise, it's always look straight ahead at the computer.
Yeah.
But this is just wonderful. I know from the number of years that we've known each other that you said storytelling, destiny led you into storytelling.
Yes.
You want to tell our viewers how that happened and what you mean when you say that?
There are many things in life that you don't think about. You have no idea of what the future holds for you. And you're very happy in the job that you're doing, which was the last job. I mean, the last role that I had was that of a librarian. And this was after 20 long years of teaching. So 20 years of teaching. So I think my first story was in a school called SSVM in 1982. And the first story that I told was a lollipop story.
Oh.
So, so the lollipop story, bubblegum stories, chocolate stories, because I made up these stories because that's when the kids would keep quiet. So this is how, and then you don't know you're telling a story because you just want to pacify the children.
Okay.
And the tool I used was story, and that I have to thank my parents, my grandparents, ancestors, whatever, who exposed me and who almost told me stories every day. So I think that was the first thought that came to me. How do I pacify children? And that's how it started. But as I said, I was not aware. I had to survive. It was not a very easy path for me. So I had to depend on my salary as a teacher.
Mhm.
And I later on got a beautiful job at the Krishnamurti Foundation School. And I became an English and social science teacher.
Oh, nice.
And again, I thought I would teach history through stories. Of course, there, because it was 100 acres, the children would all climb on the trees. And they actually emoted the ape man and the Neanderthal man. And I said, oh, that's right. But older people who are a fixed condition, they don't approve of this. And then there were murmurs, and then they said, either we remove her from this post, and that's when the director, I'm very grateful to him. He came in because I used to go to the library very often, and he said, I see her coming into the library. She's a voracious reader. And thanks to my father, again, my parents, and thanks to no technology, because we were only fed on books. So that's when he said, let's give her the librarian's job.
Oh.
Okay. And so I said, and they thought I'd keep my mouth shut, of course. Very difficult, So I sat in the library. I read a lot of books, and that's when I started writing. Very strangely, I used to write for the newspapers because the study center had Dalai Lama, Rinpoche, and all the great people coming. And I used to interview them, write for the newspapers. And I thought I would become a writer.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that's what happened. But destiny, that's what I said. Had it otherwise. So when I saw children were not reading, and I started telling them the story, so I would probably, animate it and tell the story. And there was the full moon in the sky and the deep dark woods, and he walked and he walked, and dang, the bell would go. And he'd say, tell us what happened next. And I'd say, if you read. So that's when somebody was listening to this. And that moment, I think the pole star, the Arundhati star, everything were up in the sky. And it was all aligned. And this lady, that vak is so important. You don't know what word comes at what time. It's like a recipe that comes together. And this lady said, why don't we have a workshop in the city for a week? And this was in 1996. And the first workshop. And the last day, I had fables. I had different genres. And the last day was fables. And that's when somebody wrote, because I made sounds. said, once upon a time, there was a lion, that. And then the little mouse that comes and says, oh, let me go. Right. Okay. So, it was ironically a great story because this little mouse is also, and I had a mother character inserted in that story because it goes back to its mother and says, today I promised. And the mother says, what did you promise? I said I'll help the lion one day. And the mother says, well, you better remember the promise. And later on, help, all. And then the mouse remembers, comes and says, if you shout so much, I can't think. So the lion says, no sound at all. So the lion moves back and then bites the net. And somebody was listening from outside and they had come to pick up the parents. And next day there was a column in the newspaper, a little column saying, "Yow sounds coming from a room." Who is this? A storyteller in action. And I think the whole world changed upside down. From that day, I became a storyteller.
Fabulous. Fabulous, really.
Thank you.
I do want to say before we move to the next question, there's Geeta's Here's My Story. And I think perhaps it's only Funky Rainbow who may have copies of this book. All the stories of her growing up years in Bombay, her grandparents and her parents, and the fantastic role that you can play in molding a storyteller, right? I mean, all up there in the one way that Geeta knows how to do it, through stories. So for those of you, and I could see so many comments going up saying, we're really going to order the book right after the Buzzaar. Go right up and order even now. You're online. Just open a new tab and order up just right away. We'll get it autographed in your name. And you can consider picking up Here's My Story as well, because there are just wonderful stories from Geeta's own childhood up there. But tell us, this particular book, Geeta, you have obviously traveled far and wide, 43 countries. Wow. And you have enjoyed the ride.
Absolutely.
100%. So there's stories from Japan, France, Tibet, Korea, Scotland. Tell us, why did you choose to take, readers, young and old, on a world tour in 200 pages?
Oh. Actually, I had 100 stories.
Wow. A big clap for Penguin's editorial team. The next books are up there waiting because there are 20 in this book.
I know. So nearly 100 stories.
Wow.
And because, if you calculate actually 43 countries and even 2 stories from each country. So, so that's how it was. And then there was, I think there were stories that appealed to me, and it had to also appeal to the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So the editorial team, we went up and down quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was the tone of telling the story? So So apart from the fact that I had traveled, I also have to admit, I maintain a diary every day. Whatever happens, I would write down something in the diary. So you'll have a pile of diaries in my house. And and they're all from Ramana Maharishi Ashram, because that's where I found the first story. When the newspaper column came,
right.
The first story is somebody from Madurai said, you have to come and train 300 teachers. And one person called me to Arunachala, and which means still light. And I went around that mountain, and I think that that was a very important moment for me. So my first travel, I would say, was a very spiritual internal travel.
Mm-hmm.
I saw nothingness as the mountain. I saw the movement Shakti as the bird. And there was a monkey making a sound near me. I thought, that's my mind. So what started as a metaphor became a story.
Absolutely.
So this travel started from there, and then these countries. And from each country, I have written down notes. and
Ah,
every day. So there are diaries in my
nice.
house that, so one person actually a long time ago, about 4 5 years ago, he said, just give me your notes. I want to publish just your notes,
I
but
can
it also had a
imagine.
lot of personal things. So,
All
so
making for good
yeah.
bestsellers. Give those
So he
diaries.
said, I don't want your stories, I want your jottings. So I think that was the closest. So then I had to actually I had to go through the diary notes,
Mhm.
and I had to also go through the stories that I know,
Mhm.
the stories that I'd heard. So it was not very easy because all this was here, but how
Ah,
to translate it into print is a different genre altogether, because
absolutely.
that's different. I know, because when I used to write, whenever I saw something, I wanted to write about it. But now,
Absolutely.
whenever I saw something, I wanted to tell about it. So,
Ah.
telling about it is very different from writing it down. So,
Absolutely.
I had to switch my mind and I had to say, let me send everything. And
Mhm.
so, I think nearly 2 or 3 sub editors, they
Worked with
all
you.
took turns to so first was in the telling style, then they said no, we'll have it in the reading
Reading
style.
style, yeah.
Then again it changed. Then I think they finally had a marriage between the telling style and the printing style, and that's how the book is.
It is actually,
Yeah.
really evident. In fact, you said, since you mentioned Arunachala, the
Yes.
first story, On the Wings of a Storyteller
Yes.
Bird, which is a story from India. It's just lovely, that
Yes.
it captures the timelessness of stories, and how everybody under the sun is hankering for a good friend and a good story. It is, in fact, it leads me to my next question. I mean, each of these stories marvelously, take us to different countries. But you know what? The thing that I realized from reading it, and I've read 8 of them at the moment,
Okay.
is that they're all journeys within as well, right? There is a philosophical touch to the story, which makes this perfect to read for, whether you're a child, whether you're a teenager, whether you're, a parent, grandparent. It's the layers of meaning that you're going to, get from each reading that matter. But why did you, how have you blended this outward and inward
Inward.
journeys so beautifully?
I think there are certain things that are planted from childhood, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there is a genetic factor.
Mm-hmm.
I think my father was highly spiritual in his own way. I haven't seen him doing pujas or anything, but he was highly spiritual because the goodness, the human being, and most children emote, isn't it? And he used to always have a bookmark from all the spiritual books whenever I went for a holiday. And he would ask me to just read because he knows I didn't have time. He knew I didn't have time to read the entire
Ah.
book.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things that he spoke and the conversations that we had were deeply spiritual. So it was not about Rama is the best god or Krishna is the best god,
Absolutely.
but a very beautiful transmission. And my father left absolutely no money when he died, but I think he left such a huge treasure for me to look to balance my life, and that I think is the best gift that somebody can give someone.
Absolutely.
So I think this also blended very well. So from day one, I think right from Arunachala, wherever I went to tell stories, I still remember in South Africa there was a priest, and this was during the Nelson Mandela's time,
Oh,
and he used to bury 16 bodies a day,
wow.
16 people, young people every day. He sent me the sentry, that is like a police
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, I want you to come and tell stories in my church.
Oh.
And I had a huge army van which
Mhm.
was going in the front, one at the back, and all the blacks in the church. And when I told this mountain and the bird story, when
Ah.
I told this story, all the black women and the men, they cried and they said hallelujah, hallelujah. It was such a beautiful moment. And I stopped asking questions. Why should I tell a story in a church
Yeah.
in South Africa? So I stopped asking questions, And then I went to one of the famous dargahs in Aligarh, and
Yes.
the mosque, and there they said you have to tell a story, and I told that story, and that man came and he did the thing for me,
The fan,
and I said, okay, it doesn't matter. See, everything is a blessing. Maybe I have to tell stories in these spaces, in these places, and also, of course, told stories all over the place, including. Some rishis in Gomukh when I reached.
Oh, yeah, I
Now,
remember
even
you.
the travels were not prepared. I just met people, said, come. I climbed. So, after when I remember I climbed Gomukh, I came back and I stay on the second floor. I used to stay, and I couldn't climb the 2 floors. So I thought, okay, so stories have for me it has been two parallel lines. One is personally also I have my own stories that has built me, and then these parallel stories that I've put in this book, and that is one reason why I can't divorce the two. And I had to, put, because when I speak, when I talk, when I think, I said what is reflected inside is outside, when what is within is without, and the world is one, and this Aham Brahmasmi, it's all there. And that's why this universe is made up of stories.
Lovely response. She has told stories in Gomukh, in a church in South Africa, in the Aligarh Dargah, also at Funky Rainbow today, folks. Don't go away. There's going to be a story from Geeta soon.
Yes.
But a lot of people watching us, and Geeta, there are just so many comments coming up. If we started, she says we have been regular at Kathalayas, Katha
Yes,
Sangama, and I thoroughly enjoy the same. There are just Arun saying I didn't even know she's visiting FR. Otherwise, I would have made a trip to FR. Arun, I'm holding you up to this. You're coming because Geeta Ramanujan is coming, not for Team Funky Rainbow. Sorry, discounts cancelled, Arun Ji.
Wow, I can
But
see Kavita, Vidya,
Kavita Prasad,
lovely.
so many
Usha,
people
yes,
watching up
Preeti,
here.
yes.
I wanted to say most people watching are parents, teachers, librarians, what they would also like to do, Geeta. And that's the lovely thing, about your book. You have a lot of little bits and bytes of information that even adults can use.
Precede, yeah.
Yes, to use when they're telling the
Yes.
story. So what do they want to do? They want their children to see the world in stories. What tips would you have for them?
One is, of course, travel when all the Omicron is over.
Till then, pick up the book
Yeah,
and travel
and
through
travel
the book.
with the book. Because there's a lot of identification that may happen. Because I've given a little prelude to every story,
That's
and
right.
I've also followed it up with some facts about that story itself,
Right.
which might prod you to find out more. I think a story should also be a learning. That's why I said it's not only for children, but it the sense of wonder is something beautiful in a story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The basic fact is so boring, and then when you ask next what, and there's a plot, and then it ends beautifully, then that curiosity, that sense of wonder, I think is so beautiful when you tell a story. And I feel that this might bring that kind of hope and curiosity, and maybe you want to reread the stories too, because at each time they appeal to you in a very different way. So I want this to be more like a traveler in time, so that suppose 5-10 years down the line the child still wants to read the book, and it may have a different appeal. The same story might have a different
Absolutely.
appeal. Yeah, so I think it's so important to speak the truth, to tell, to talk, to communicate. I think today we have a big problem with communication.
Absolutely.
So I tell parents, if you're feeling shy to communicate with your child, at least sit with a book and pretend. So at least the child will emote and they will pretend. If you don't have, say, I'm not a storyteller, I don't know any stories. That's a lot of things I hear when I in the academy.
Yeah.
So I say, no, you don't have to know anything, but your attempt, your effort. You know your own stories, and they're so special. Why don't you sit with your child and just tell your stories? And you know that the child will be so happy to just listen to your stories. So you don't have to take an alien story on the first day, but the touch, I think, makes a lot of difference.
Absolutely.
And I say 3 doses of TLC, tender loving care, more than enough. Just shuffle the head. That's why they were used to call it Upanishad, which means sitting close and listening. That energy is so important. So don't tell story to your children online. Make them sit near you at your home and tell the story. Yeah, so this is something that I would say. And reading aloud is, I think, listening, that shabdam, the sparsham and shabdam are so important, because the emotions and the shabd that comes out, it has a beautiful way of that unarvugal, which is energy that goes. So the listeners will get absorbed into that story. Yeah.
Beautiful. Actually, what you really, what Geeta is saying is that tell your children stories.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether you're from your own life. For a child, everything that the parent or the adult says is like a story, really.
Yeah.
And, for those of you who feel that you may not have stories at your fingertips, there are wonderful books from which you can certainly derive stories.
Sure.
Such a pleasure being in conversation with you, Geeta. But I know our audience is absolutely waiting for that one thing. So is the audience at Funky Rainbow as well. I can see Joanne Saldana has come up saying, hey, you've got a very special guest today.
Yes.
Hello, Geeta. Absolutely.
Yeah. She did our course also. Yes.
Joanne has been part of the. I mean, there's got to be like, generations of storytellers that come out of all the courses that Geeta, conducts at Kathalaya. But we're going to let her do what she does best, tell you a story from this wonderful book. Sorry? Yeah. So we're going to take a small time out, rearrange the chair for Geeta to tell you a story. Meanwhile, just be waiting for to be transported to another world very quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to move out. I'm going to move out.
Standing.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the beginning, way back, a time we don't know about, people say there was nothing. And this nothing was probably pregnant with everything. We don't know. And I think the first thing that we all learn is that we don't know really. And so it's only a kind of illusion that people try to find out what was there in the beginning. Well, out of that beginning, some people say there was sounds. Some people say there were the elements and the clouds and the masses that came together. And some people say there was a big bang. Some people say there was a very silent explosion, and the most powerful was the sun. And the sun had a way of attracting everyone, but in silence. Remember, he just stood there, powerful. And all the elements and the planets, they started coming out of that nothingness. Probably first came Saturn, and he was very egoistic, and he just said, I'm the greatest. Bruck, 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 bruck. That's how he came. Even though he did not want to come near the sun, well, he was attracted towards the sun. He had to form his own orbit, and he accepted. And then came, of course, Jupiter with all his rings, like a very handsome guy. And he was so jolly. He was with all his wives. He didn't even notice the sun, and he formed his orbit. And then came Venus, and she was so attracted to the sun. Can I stay close to you? She said. And the sun also liked her, and he said, yes, you can be the closest to me. Thank you. And that was Venus. Well, while all this was happening, the elements, the fire, the wind, this earth, everything was moving about, trying to find an entry. When they went to Saturn, he said, no entry. Jupiter was busy, and so was Mercury and Mars. But there was one friendly planet which was coming out of that. And that was the Earth. She was so open. She was so happy. And she was so inviting for all the elements. And she said, get in. And so all the elements got into this beautiful earth that we're all living in today. And so the fire said, I am the strongest. Yeah. So he burst into volcanic eruptions, and he burnt and burnt and burnt, and there was fire everywhere. Well, in those days, you have to take things happened for many, 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 many years, not like now. So for a long time, the fire burnt, but then someone was very patient, and this was blup, 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 the water. So the fire, after he burnt and burned, he was so tired. And just as he was going to rest, whoo! The water, as a huge tidal wave, chased this fire. The fire went up and went into everything on the earth, not to be seen, which is mentioned in the Kathopanishad. Well, the water, whoo! Became the oceans. And then the wind, hurricanes, and then a gentle breeze. The earth, she took it all. And from there stood a huge, big mountain with a shoulder, and parts of that mountain which people couldn't see, measuring the heaven and earth in solitude. Why am I telling you this story? Because this is the first story in the book. And as this mountain, he was happy because the clouds moved by, the sun, the setting sun, orange and red, and he used to drink the colors, and he had a silent communication with the sun. But you know what? What is constant is change. So one day this mountain started heaving a sigh. And that's when a group of birds, for the first time, just like how I've come first time here to Funky Rainbow, the same way, those birds were going. And there was one little bird which was coming. And where did she sit? On that shoulder. Who are you? Because it's the first time this bare, naked mountain was listening or feeling someone's touch.
Oh, I'm a little bird. I'm coming all the way from the Himalayas. I lost my way because I was coming with my parents and grandparents, my cousins, sisters, and then, I got hurt in my left week. Can I please stay for a while?
The mountain didn't understand a word. And he said, "Can you go slow? I can't follow you."
Oh, you can't move?
No.
You're fixed.
Yes.
How sad.
No, no, that's fine. Well, that's when the mountain asked, "Himalayas,
Yes.
where is it?"
Oh, it's a mountain just like, but how do I tell you? And that's when the bird
Started telling the stories to that mountain. And then it was time for the bird to leave. And that's when, for the first time, the mountain looked at that bird and the beautiful sunset. And as she was disappearing, he felt a pang. And that's when the bird decided,
oh my God, I'm leaving my friend. Oh my God.
and came back. And first time she looked at the mountain looked at the bird, and the bird said,
You know what? I'll come back next year, same time.
"Sure, I'll wait for you."
Okay, bye.
Now, every year, that bird came and told so many stories. And I was wondering, what are the stories that the bird would have told this mountain? What are the places that the bird would have traveled to? And all that is in this book. So, if you want to know what are the stories that the bird told the mountain, and what happened to this original story of the mountain and the bird, you have to read the book. Yes? So, this is just the beginning. Thank you so much for listening, because even though I can't see you all really, I know I can feel your energy. And there is energy here, and that makes so much difference, because only when the listeners are energetic does a storyteller tell a tale. Thank you so much.
Please come back up again. And there is it. It is, folks, a sneak peek into what wonderful stories lie inside this lovely little book published by Penguin. And like Geeta said, she, much like the bird came to the mountain. The mountain, Funky Rainbow Mountain, is this mountain has not been able to move in 2 years. We were a traveling bookshop, right? But this bird, this lovely storytelling bird, tells us that we will be out and about very, very soon. It's just wonderful, Geeta. Thank you so much for joining us at the Book Bazaar. It's such an honor, such a pleasure, and a real privilege to launch Tales from the World at Funky Rainbow with the one and only Geeta Ramanujam. Of course, there are comments, and Joanne saying that was just wonderful. Jyoti Narayan saying you transported us to that mountain, loved your telling. Sunila saying thank you so much. And yes, to the energy and enthusiasm. Geeta Ramanujam, thank you. We just love this.
Thank you, Shalini, Basa, Kavita Prasad, Swati, Arun, Jyoti Narayan, all those whom I can see. I'm so sure you're going to buy the book. Okay. So please do that, because it helps me to write another book then, and also helps Funky Rainbow and all of us in the storytellers world.
Yes. Thank you. It's just absolutely wonderful. We do have a quick segment from Jiva Jaydas saying, love you, Geeta Ramanujam. My God, look at all the love coming to us from the screen. 2G ka kamal hai, like, right? Before we get on to just our last quick segment, I have to say what Geeta said about travel and the words 2G, reminding me of a lovely story. We were traveling in Uttarakhand once as a group of friends.
Okay.
And everywhere that we stopped, we were going to be trekking up the mountain. Everywhere where we got 2G connection or 3G connection, everybody was sending mails. Everybody was working, and something they had to respond to office calls, etc., whatever, right? But the 2G became 3G, became 1G. It was there, kabhi G tha, kabhi G nahi tha. Like, and then we reached a certain point where, two traveling friends joined us who were going to take us on the trek. And I told that guy, just give me half hour more. I have to send a mail to office. But yahan pe na to 2G hai, na to 3G hai. You know what he did? He shut my computer and he said, bas yahan se sirf Shivji.
Oh! I love that.
You have to be a traveler to know these stories. And what we're going to do now is to welcome somebody, a distant relative, who comes traveling all the way from Kengeri to, regale you just before we close out the show. Funky Rainbow's very own forgettable relative, but much loved, Kengeri Hanumanta Rao. Please welcome.
Wow.
Namaskara. I am the Kengeri Hanumanta Rao. Like you, some of you may already knows me, but I am Goa last year, and what the ladies is not see. I have disappeared from screen right now because some peoples are doing it like that. But I am here once again this year. Happy New Year! A season, no new season has started. No, so I am going to ask you a riddle. See, Geeta madam is telling us the very many stories and all. Then she is saying to us, stop asking questions. But if I stop asking questions, how will I do riddle? Not possible, no. So I am ask you only one riddles to start off this new season of Book Buzzaar. Okay. So question is, you have all listened to the Akbar and the fearful stories and all. Then very, very funny stories like that they are saying. So in one stories like that, he's asking the Birbal, you go away from the kingdom. And then he goes away and all like that and all happens. And then he says, I want one pot full of wit and all like that. That is only clue. Okay, now I am asking you one question, just like the emperor is asking the Birbal. Okay, now he is asking the Birbal to buy one thing from the market. One things you have to buy, but you should be able to eat that thing. Okay, like the num num like the lunch. Then you also able to drink it. So you have to eat it, you have to drink it, then you have to feed your cow. Cow, the moo, that cow. You have to feed the cows with it, and then you also have to. See, I am myself only forgetting sometimes. Oh yes, I able to plant the seeds in the gardens. Like in Kangeri, we are doing. No, like I last time I told, they are working in the fields, hard working. So like that. So what is the thing you can buy from market? Okay, you can eat it, you can drink it, you can feed the cows with it, then you can plant the seeds in the garden. So I will give you 30 seconds. Yes. Computer, lock kiya jaye. Yes, yes, yes.
Don't watch too much KBC King.
Yes, KBC Kangeri. Yes, Kangeri banega crorepati. Then I am looking for answer. Mango. Yes, mango is possible. Yes, very good. Yeah. But hey, I got the right answers from the Divya man, and I think it is the Aviyukt only. He told me he's giving watermelon. That is correct answer. Watermelon, you can eat the watermelon like red color inside. Then you can also drink it by making the juices. So once you make the juices of the watermelon, you can drink it. Then you can feed the outer the rind they calls, no. The editor knows all the right words. So the rinds you can feed the cows, or you can feed the goats also. You can also eat it, but I am not recommend. We are not do like that. And then you can take the seeds so and plant in the gardens for more watermelons. Just like that. It's indeed a fabulous idea. Then you can also be farmings like that, like people like us. So with that, I shall give the dayas back to the editor Amma to continue the season 4 of the book Buzzaar, and I can't seize my eyesight. I am riot. If I am riot, I will be arrested. No, police will come. No, no riots and all like that. Okay, editor Ramaji, please comes back and continue the season 4. Okay, namaskara. I will see you again next week.
Good God, Kengeri. But that was, yes, he is a riot. Absolutely, Kengeri Hanumantarao. Even though we believe our relative is a total pain, we could very well do with that wisdom. In fact, I had an answer for him. The answer could well be stories. You can plant the stories, you can eat the stories, you can drink the stories, and they can absolutely, grow everywhere, here, there, every day. Relative doesn't have buddhi, but we can make up for it, right? But with that, we come to an end, of the first episode of season 4 of the book Buzzaar. Thank you so much for the unstinting support. I said this at the beginning of the show, and I know a few of you were in there already. For a small little independent bookshop to do this for 2 years, for entirely 2 years, to be able to pull this off week after week after week. There's just one thing that keeps us going. That is your unstinting love, your unstinting support, and books and stories that abound at Funky Rainbow. We would like to send a big thank you out to Penguin India, again to the team, Sohini Mitra, Mansi Shetty, Grishma, and everybody else at Team Penguin. Thank you so much for supporting this Buzzaar. A big thank you goes out to the 2 Gs of our life, okay, who I think, whose dazzling power will beat Shivji any day for sure. It's been such a pleasure to host this Buzzaar. The copies of the book are available abundantly, like the seeds in the watermelon that Kengeri was talking about. Tons of them here. Geeta is going to be with us for the next 2 hours. Place those orders and tell us whose names you want the copies autographed to. We'll be glad to get them all signed and send them to you next week. But through the weekend, keep those stories going, folks. There's just nothing that keeps you more alive than stories. Bye-bye, and we'll see you next week.